Literacy is more than just the reading and writing of a written language. It's the ability to read and understand signs and symbols in one's surroundings. Those who are literate adapt to their environment as somewhat of a survival mechanism, learning both the way the system in which they live operates and what is expected of them as an individual. Shirley Bryce Heath writes about this type of literacy in her piece about the children of Tracton. Both Dr. Mike Rose and James Paul Gee speak about the difficulties of adjusting the ideas and processes learned in one's own environment to fit another system. Upon becoming an Air Force spouse, one loses control over many things the average family takes for granted. Any immediate support system of family and friends present before is often left hundreds of miles away, and in their place stands a completely new environment with different standards, expectations, rules, and restrictions.
Welcome to the spouse briefing for your sponsors, Upcoming 365. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Martinez. The tasking is for 365, but active duty must go to a cast for 2 months prior. During cast, your spouse will be learning CST skills, convoy and fire team operations, as well as cultural training specific to their AOR. If your spouse happens to be at a major operating base, many facilities will be available. However, if your spouse gets forward deployed to a FOB, all communication will be limited. Please keep in mind, whether at a large base or a FOB, due to the nature of their job, they will not be able to communicate specifics of time and dates. But if you have established open and receptive communication, you should be able to notice any significant change in their demeanor, attitude, or outlook. Should this occur, you have the following avenues to either educate yourself or receive personal help: the chaplain, your neighbors, key spouse organization, the first shirt of your spouse's squadron, or personal relationships you have built throughout the community. Even if this is not yours or your spouse's first deployment, please keep in mind various AORs affect military personnel in different ways. Stay vigilant. When you receive word of your spouse's return, know that you will have 10 to 14 days of R&R during reintegration. During this time, there are a multitude of programs offered by AFRC which will aid with reconnecting the active duty member to the family unit. If you feel your safety is an issue with your spouse gone, or if you would feel more secure on the installation during your spouse's 365, base housing can be made available. Please keep in mind the standards of living on base include no more than 2 pets, weekly lawn inspections, as well as noise, housing, and activity restrictions. Security forces patrol the housing regularly as both enforcers of security and housing standards. Finally, it is your duty as a spouse to educate yourself on the resources available to active duty members and encourage your spouse towards those programs if he or she exhibits any of the telltale signs of PTSD. For example, inability to reconnect, sleeplessness, depression, thoughts of suicide, anger, personality change, or sudden interest in adrenaline-producing activities. If you have any questions, please contact one of your squadron's key spouses. They can provide additional assistance to you during deployment concerning STAP, LES, DEERS, AFES, BAH, CPO, CDC, FSC, MWR, PFMP, SGLI, AFAS, FLE, FRP, and INR. Are there any questions? No? Thank you again for coming to the briefing. I am Lieutenant Stephen Martinez. Welcome to the Air Force.
An Air Force spouse is expected not only to differentiate between various officers and enlisted ranks of the Air Force, but also recognize the levels of responsibility and authority attributed to those ranks. While every job is important within the service, some ranks demand more respect. A spouse is not held to the same standards as his or her active duty counterpart, but military protocol still stresses that the spouse abide by certain social practices. Most often, these etiquette expectations are simply to avoid awkward situations. But in more severe cases, the actions of the spouse can lead to military reprimands or punishments for the active duty member, including demotion, which means a loss of income. To navigate daily life in a military environment, a spouse must recognize a number of abbreviations, acronyms, and military terms. Acronyms and abbreviations, in particular, are used so frequently that the words they represent are often forgotten altogether. Many times, a spouse or even an active duty member does not know what the actual abbreviation or acronym stands for, yet they understand what is being referenced and when it is used. Some would argue that there's no need for those outside of the military to know the literacy of an Air Force spouse. But I would suggest that it's always easier to understand and help someone if you speak the same language. Many civilians are related to military families or simply want to show their appreciation for the sacrifices Air Force families make to support the nation. Sometimes the attempts to give military spouses relief are not always as effective as they could be, simply because those offering the assistance do not understand the areas of need or limitations in the military home. It's easy to be intimidated by the literacy necessary for survival as an Air Force spouse, or overwhelmed by the energy it takes to learn this new literacy. Sometimes the spouse may become introverted as a result and avoid reaching out to the channels of support or making friendships after moving to a new military installation. While written information is available, it's most often filled with common military terms and jargon somewhat foreign to new spouses. Military benefits and organizational practices also have their own literacy involved. To navigate the process of health care, dental care, permanent change of stations, deployments, military child care, military funerals, change of commands, and other ceremonies, takes a know-how most often built through trial and error or personal relationships with more experienced spouses. Both self-education and mentorship are essential to mastering the military language.